All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Sunday Civics Citizenship Lab. I'm L. Joy Williams, and welcome to this afternoon's class. I want to thank all of you who have been consistently showing up and doing the work. If you are watching this, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it back, would love to see some of you all share your homework. If you will remember, the homework was to do a landscape analysis of your local community on a local issue. And that means nobody should be giving me a plan or something talking about fighting something on the federal level. Everything should be state or local based, right? Unless the federal government is directly impeding on something locally and statewide, which this administration is. So unless that is directly happening, the issue that you are doing a landscape analysis on should be local, should pertain to your community, it should be local or state-based. And I want you to gather your notes from there, because as you will notice, if you've been with us since the beginning of the class to now, everything builds upon each other. And, that is by design, because I want you to see how interconnected everything is. And I want you to see this, that it requires sustained engagement. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that because we're going to talk about a ladder today. And where some of us are on that ladder. And then you'll be able to take the landscape analysis that you all were working on, and you will be able to apply some of what you are doing or the analysis that you did. And you'll be able to use this process to continue your activism and engagement. So let me see in the chat. And if you're watching this later, feel free to comment as well. I want to know some of the issues that you are conducting landscape analysis on. We got a few of those of our last class, where people were talking about school board issues. They were talking about utilities, whether it be the water board, electricity, or things of that nature, childcare, education, various issues. So put it in the chat or post it in the comments and tell me what you conducted your landscape analysis on. What issue, what local or state issue was prevalent? And this, looking back at the survey that we did from the first class, and I asked you, didn't collect your emails or anything, but I asked folks to give me an understanding of where you are in terms of civic engagement. And the folks that are joining us weekly, there is a wide range. You have people who have just been, they're politically aware, they listen, they know what's going on, they vote, they encourage other people to vote. And then you have other people who are, active in their local organization, whether that be a local NAACP, urban league, or other state-based organizations and coalitions. You have people in here who have run for office, some folks who are holding elected office. So we have a wide range of folks here. And what was interesting, though, is that all of you who are taking this class, and all of you who participated by sharing the information on the survey, said that they wanted to go deeper. Now, imagine that. You would think that people who want to go deeper are people that are not, currently engaged. Maybe they just vote and maybe they're just aware. But you have people who are even, active in organizations and active in helping to elect people who are saying that they want to go deeper. And that is a good thing, because no matter where you are on the civic engagement spectrum, there is always, a ladder that you can continue to climb in order to deepen. And you don't have to skip rungs. Like if you only have the capacity to go from aware voter, frequent voter, to, okay, I'm a donor or a member of an organization, or collecting signatures or things. It doesn't, like, you need to do what you have the capacity to do. I can't, from New York, in my particular place, push you beyond your limits. A local leader, a local institution that you are involved in, because they know you, have a relationship with you, and you have a relationship with them, are the only people that can push you to do more. And you may gather inspiration, right, from national leaders or for heads of organizations who may, ask you to dig a little deeper, do a little bit more. There's a difference, though, between inspiration and pushing you further, or pushing you beyond your limits. That requires relationship. And you will hear me all the time. I say this on the show. We've said it so far in a number of classes, that civic engagement does require relationship and engagement with other people. And particularly from a Black tradition, the relationship is important. Right? You can't decide, I'm going to improve my building. June, who works with me, she can say all day long that she's going to improve her building and include in the things that she wants to do. But if she doesn't have a relationship with the other people in her building, so that she can bounce ideas off of them, that they can have a shared understanding, they can butt heads sometimes, and they be like, June, that's a really nice goal, but that ain't what we need, right? We need, you say we need XYZ, we're saying we need ABC, right? So that kind of coordination and conversation and relationship is really, really important, because as we talk about civic engagement of, organized people learning, using their power, again, what's hidden in that is relationship. And so if you don't have a relationship with folks, your neighbors, people in your community, other organizations, other organized leaders, you run the risk of having a paternalistic view of what needs to be done. And I run into these people all the time. People who have a paternalistic view of civic engagement, of politics, or whatever, they will tell you all the day long what you ought to be doing. You ought to be doing this. And particularly this happens a lot within NAACP. NAACP ain't shit. You need to be doing this and blah, 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 blah. And then when I say, okay, come in, let us come together, let us plan together. What do you mean about this suggestion that you have? Who's the decision maker on this? Well, if we do it your way, or if we do this way, where are we going to get the resources from? Or how can we, or I sometimes, or a lot of times, push back on people. And I'm like, okay, how can we help you do the thing you want, like you're saying we need to do? And then people are like, oh, no, I'm saying y'all need to do it. And I'm like, wait, you telling me what I need to, how are you contributing like to this thing you say we ought to be doing, right? The relationship piece is really, really important. And you see this also, like when we're talking about issues like gentrification, right? Where you have people that are coming into areas and they assess from their lens, from their background, from their, resources, what ought to happen in the community, not taking into account what the existing community has already been fighting for, which can include some of the things, right, that newer folks are saying need to happen. But then they push themselves and their needs above the people that they are not in relationship with, not in coordination, not in communication with. And then those needs get met because they are louder, oftentimes more appealing to whoever the decision maker is, particularly financially. And then those needs get met, and then they don't have a relationship with the existing community. We see that playing a lot. Those of you who are in New York City and you hear about the tension between those who identify as DSA, Democratic Socialists, coming into what were once traditionally African American and Latino communities. And you have that tension because people live in an area like Bedford-Stuyvesant, for example, but they don't have any relationship or engagement with existing, community and political structures that exist, right? And so it creates this tension because of the absence of relationship. So I say all of this as a caution to those of us who are going to further and dig deeper in our engagement and our civic practice, that to make sure that you are building relationship and that you have engagement with the community in which you are in, and that you are not being a gentrifier, being paternalistic, and saying, you folks that have been here for some time or have been advocating for an issue for some time, you don't know anything. This is what we ought to be doing. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. Don't gentrify civic engagement. Okay. And so even if you have lived in a community, even if you are from that community and coming back to that community, we can, go back to the Lowndes County documentary from our first homework assignment. All right. Remember the initial person, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but the initial person, he had come back home to help his family. Even though he was raised in the community, he went away for some time, had come back to help his family with the farm and the land and stuff, and then, saw what was happening in terms of a lack of political power, because where he was previously, he was registered and he was active. And then he comes back home and sees the disconnect. He didn't immediately be like, this is what y'all ought to be doing, right? No, as you see in the documentary and you hear it in the story, he has conversations with the people of the community. He engages, he builds relationship, having a conversation, going from church, going to, other organizations and things of that nature. And then collectively, they decided what the direction or what the goals will be. He didn't come home and be like, y'all backward, Negroes, y'all need to be doing this. No, he built relationship. And so I want you to write this down for those of you who are taking notes. And John Hewlett, thank you so much in the chat. I want you to write this down. And this is not a homework assignment, but really it is something for you to keep as a frame of mind. And it is, how am I building relationship or expanding relationship in my community? And this is for those particularly who are active and engaged, but also for people who are looking to be engaged. How are you building and expanding relationship in the community? That's critically, critically important. It's something that I come back to even leading, something as a state NAACP, of how am I building and expanding relationship with members, but then also how am I building relationship and expanding with other civil rights groups and organizations in the communities that we serve. And then also, how am I expanding beyond the people that I'm talking to, because the work that I do is for Black people in New York. And so how am I continuing to know and assess that the things that I am doing, the things that we are organizing around, are really impactful, and the things that Black New Yorkers need and say they want, unless I have relationship. All right. So make sure that you do that. Now I'm going to go through the chat here, and I see some of the moments of the that you all are doing in terms of your landscape analysis. The other big one that we talked about last time was opposition to data centers. That was a big one. Opposition to rolling back police reform collaborative. That is a good one. And then road work and energy costs. Energy costs, oh my gosh. The amount, and I know I should not do like anecdotal stories because it doesn't apply, but like my electricity bill went up to $360 and I got solar panels. Make it make sense. And then zoning in communities and things of that nature. So you all have a wide range of things that you have done a landscape analysis on. And I want to center us back into some of the lessons that we had in previous weeks. We defined power, and that power has the ability to influence outcomes, not feelings, not visibility, outcomes. This is critically important because we just don't want people to, feel good and, appeals to people at the kindness of their heart to do actions. No. Power is the ability to influence outcomes. All right. And then we did the landscape analysis and we asked the specific questions. Who actually decides, who makes the decision, who influences them, what type of power dominates. And we talked about different types of power and leverage that can be used. And so now I want to push us a bit further. Let me get my notes up here so I can see. Let's see. All right. So seeing power and activating power are not the same thing. And this is where we can get kind of stalled. And we get stalled between awareness and activation. Now, part of doing an overall campaign, sometimes you need to raise awareness about an issue. Sometimes in your overall campaign plan, and that's a more advanced thing, a class of like developing an actual campaign plan. But one of the things that you may need to do in the beginning is raise awareness about the issue. So people may know, they may have been a couple of, maybe a story, maybe not, in local or state news about things. But, part of the thing is that we need to raise our collective awareness. And I'm still going to always do the call back to Lowndes County for centering us here. So even when John Hewitt and his neighbors and friends and others came together, and then SNCC came in as well, what they assess is they need to raise the collective consciousness and awareness of you having the rights and what the barriers are for people who wanted to exercise those rights. And so we needed an education campaign, an awareness campaign. And quite often people get stuck there where they're just informing or, aggregating the latest news on an issue. And that becomes all of the campaign and all of we're fighting the fight by informing you of what the fight is. Okay. So I'm going to put this slide up, or the team is going to put this slide up. And I'm going to show you what I call what is called like the civic activation ladder. So level 1 is awareness. You need to raise everyone's awareness, particularly the people impacted. And also in your raising awareness issue, you are also raising awareness. You're also letting those decision makers know that you know what the issue is and you know who the decision makers are. And that's critically important as well, because you're putting people on notice. I know what you're doing. We're following what you're doing. Or it could be, legislators who have been trying to work on an issue for some time, and they welcome the attention and the information so that they can collectively continue their work. I can give you an example. Sometimes in a state legislature, it takes, and even in Congress, it takes a bill being introduced maybe 3 or 4 sessions before something is actually voted on or activated on. And that is because people are raising awareness about the issue and continuing to apply pressure and negotiation. Then we get to level 2, information sharing. Then level 3, individual action. Level 4, coordinated action. And then level 5, sustained pressure. Now, most people who are politically informed and engaged, which would probably be most of us in this room, are at levels 1 to 3. Right? We're aware about this. We share it. We'll share it on Facebook. We're sharing an email. Did you know that this? Did you know that Congress, did you know that my cousins recently were listening to an old episode of mine where I talk about we don't have a constitutional right to vote. We have constitutional protections on the federal level, but there is no constitutional right to vote in the Constitution. You may have it in your state constitution, but not in the Constitution. And so I see a post from my cousin. Did you know we don't have a constitutional right to vote? And she's like pulling out my thing, right? So she was aware. Now she's sharing the information that she's learning. And then we get to individual action. So we read, we listen, we share articles, we create posts, we may be doing TikTok videos on Instagram, we vote, we may be donate, we call our representative, all of those like individual actions that we do on a particular issue. And that's not nothing. I'm not at all disparaging those things, because as you see, they are part of the overall process in terms of what we are doing to move the needle. But for structural change, right, when you are trying to make structural change, when you are trying to upend the system and remake it so that it is more equitable, if you are trying to break a stronghold of, wealthy people or wealthy communities or institutions getting more resources than others, right? Those structural changes, that power lives at level 4 and level 5. And many of the issues, particularly that Black folks need or continue to work on, require level 5 effort. They require sustained pressure. But we are applying level 2 energy to them, right? So level 1, awareness, you know what's happening. You're up to date on all the information. Level 2, you're telling other people what's happening, right? Level 3, you act alone, you call, you donate, you attend a rally, you vote, and it feels like engagement. And a lot of times when we were at, where were we? When we were at the period during the election cycle and just after this current administration, those who are engaged in like the sustained effort are often put upon to give people things for level 3. And I get this question all the time. Tell me what I ought to be doing. What should we be doing? What rally, and should we be calling, and should we be doing, this? And they are having people respond to, give me things at level 3 to do, because then I feel engaged. Then I feel like I'm doing something. And that is our charge, right? Those of us who are leaders and organizers in our space, we are charged with giving people things to do. But I think at one point I told Karen, I was like, that people underestimate how much work that takes to do it in terms of part of the plan, giving people individual actions. When you're trying to get to the coordinated and sustained pressure. And I know from what you guys completed in the survey that are watching and engaging this is where you're trying to go. So this is why I'm like honing in on this right now. The individual action, the level 3, makes people feel like they're doing something. That's why like people do the pink pussy hats and all of and the safety pins and the black squares and all of those other kind of things, because it is something physical. It is something that an individual I can go do this and then come home and cook dinner and like go about the rest of my day. Right. But institutions are not moved solely by individual action. They are moved by coordinated action and sustained pressure. All right. So let's talk about level 4, that coordinated action. Now, this is where we move together. There's planning, there's alignment, there are roles, there's repetition, right? We see that when we watch the Lowndes County documentary. They didn't just have the individuals, go register to vote and then like, all right, and then we're done, right? Like it was coordinated, right? Let us go collectively. Instead of one individual going, we're all going to go collectively. If you watch Selma and you see the piece in there where instead of individuals going to register, they all go to register at one particular time, right? So that coordinated action, that was also planned, and people understood what their respective roles are, right? These are the people who are eligible that they're going to register. These are the people who are going to be the spokesperson. These are the people that are going to talk to media, because we need to continue to go to reach those folks who are at level 1 awareness. So we need to continue to, make sure that we're bringing in more people to the movement so we can sustain the movement from that regard, because we consistently need to bring people in so that people don't get burned out and people don't get tired, but we create that sustained pressure on a regular basis, right? There is repetition, and it happens regularly, and doesn't falter, right? When you're doing a campaign in that aspect, if you have extreme ebbs and flows, people tend to forget, or, they become apathetic and despondent because they don't see continued action on an issue. And then when we get to sustained pressure, this is where change can happen. This is when, the budget is influenced, because now, we're consistently having people coming to the state house, consistently meeting with the governor, consistently meeting with the state legislature, consistently showing up at the voter registration, the registrar office, consistently showing up at the hearings that are deciding, the zoning, consistently showing up when the powers that be are discussing the data center. They're showing up at the meetings. They're showing up at the hearings. They're right, like that consistency, that people know that you're a consistent presence as part of the campaign, right? That is where you then are able to shift some of the power, and you being present and engaged, right? That's where, votes can be flipped, because now legislators, are seeing this constant engagement. And so now your state legislator, is like, I need to talk to my constituents because they keep showing up and they're engaging. And so I need to make sure I'm aligned with them, because later down the line, I want them to be aligned with me, right? It may be the governor is saying, okay, this is not going away. Let's bring them into the conversation and helping design, what the impact will be on, for the policy as it relates to letting a data center be placed in the community. That sustained pressure means not just one email, not just one phone call, not one individually, not just having one big rally and that's it, but weeks, months, and sometimes years of organizing. That sustained engagement, making your presence known, continuing to stay engaged. And again, if you are in relationship and in community and you are consistently having people do different roles of bringing people in, it will not have to be you all the time. It will not have to be the same 10 people all the time, because you are creating a cycle of sustained pressure that there's always that engagement. Now, we can go back to Lowndes County. Individuals didn't register quietly and by themselves, right? It was a sustained effort, doing things in a collective nature. One, for witness, two, for demonstration of power and engagement. They ran candidates. They educated voters. And even in the first time, when they didn't win the first time, it didn't matter. They didn't stop at one loss. They continued. Okay, what did we learn from that loss? What did we learn from this piece? Oh, we didn't realize that people stuffed ballots. We didn't realize, the impact of them, bringing people who were working on their fields and telling them to, vote this way. Like, we didn't. Right. So now I've learned from the thing. And now when we come back the second time around, we know what to do. All right. We need to, identify more people. We need to have, this is where we get poll watchers from. Right. When through the 40s and through the 70s, early 70s, where you see all of these things happening in the South at the poll site, this is when civil rights organizations and institutions do the work of poll watching, where they're like, okay, we're going to have people who are watching and are able to document and identify when things are things like stuffing ballots or not counting a ballot or things like that happen. That's how we get to, there has to be, physical eyes and having people of different parties looking at ballots and doing the count and observers watching that process. And it was then eventually those same observers would then even go to other places in other countries to observe their elections. That comes out of the civil rights tradition, right? Because they learned from how the racists and folks were trying to maintain power. All right. They ran candidates, they educated voters, they returned again. That is coordinated action. Right. And consistently bringing in new people because they're raising awareness, sharing the information, and then moving them to individual action and then folding them into the coordinated action for sustained pressure. And despite retaliation, despite, the charges and things of that nature, they continued that pressure because they were also bringing in more people and raising the collective awareness of everyone into that campaign, right? So let's do a self-assessment based upon your landscape analysis on the issue that you chose. Where are you, and maybe where is your community on the ladder? Look at your notes. Look at the issue that you are addressing. Where is the collective community on the ladder? Are they just sharing information back and forth? Have you reached the level of coordinated action? Are you, where power lives right now? Not only you, but also the larger community that you have a relationship and that you're engaged with. Okay? So do that self-assessment of where the campaign and where you are. Are you reacting or are you coordinating? Are you showing up once, or did you just learn about this issue when you're still at the information sharing stage? And that's fine. You just know that you're going to get, further into the sustained pressure piece. But identifying where you are is incredibly important, okay? Because most of us, even seasoned people, and look, you can be at various levels on various issues. On an economic justice issue, you may be at level 5. You're like in it, you're part of the sustained pressure and engagement. But on the education issues, you're just aware about the issue. You're aware of it. You haven't even shared the information yet because you're 10 toes down on economic justice related issues. That is perfectly fine, right? But a lot of even seasoned people are at levels 2 or 3, because getting to 4 and 5 requires, again, that relationship, engagement, and a sustained campaign and a plan, and it requires stamina. It requires commitment. You can't be apathetic, long. You can be like in your house for a moment and be like, God damn it. Like, I'm tired of this. But you don't let that take over. You don't let that control what you do and what you don't do. And that period of sustained pressure is, to be honest, oftentimes people drop off because things are not moving fast enough. It requires a lot of stamina. And if you don't see things moving, you then begin to fall into despair and think that you're powerless. And that is collectively, where I feel like a lot of people are right now, where people feel powerless because things are happening around them, despite their individual action, despite what could be perceived as coordinated action. And if I would diagnose right now, I feel like the collective country is at individual action. There are organizations and others that have like coordinated action going on, but there is no collective, universal action and sustained peace. It's, different entities moving different spaces and moving different things. But we are not powerless. We're just uncoordinated. Okay? We are not powerless. And that is why teaching civic engagement, teaching people to build relationship, teaching people, to build engagement actions and maintaining that civic pressure is so important. We are not powerless. We are just uncoordinated. And we have so many examples throughout history that when people get coordinated, we flipping some tables and changing some things. And so that is why being aware, sharing the information, yes, doing your individual action, but getting to the point of coordinated action and knowing that we are going to continue to keep foot on necks, right? Continue to organize and build. There's power, and letting people know that there's power there. That is so critically important, right? So now let's go to your landscape analysis, right? You've picked your issue. You know who the decision maker is. You know what type of power dominates right now. Is it political power? Is it economic power? Is it disruptive, right? Like is there always a protest at the school board meeting, things of that nature. Now the real question is, what level of activation is required to get to the win? What would level 4 on your issue actually look like? What would coordinated action actually look like on that issue? What does coordinated action look like on either opposing the development of a data center or creating policies that are beneficial to the community if a data center would be there? What would level 4 look like as it pertains to economic development or economic justice issues? What would level 4 look like for the issue that you conducted the landscape analysis on? I'm not even getting to level 5 of the sustained pressure. What does coordinated action look like? Does it require, here in New York, I'm, recognizing the issues of immigration justice and knowing that the voices of Black immigrant groups and the needs and concerns are largely left out of the conversation. And so, the lack of coordinated action is apparent. So let's gather all of those groups and stuff together and what are we going to collaboratively do? How are we going to make sure our messaging is complementary and to what each individual organization is doing? Let's look at the resources that everybody has, right? You focus on the things that you do best, and then we'll complement by focusing on something else. What does the coordinated action look like on the work that you are doing? And you're not only diagnosing, but then you have to be in relationship and talk to other folks, other organizations, and other groups and say, hey, let's get coordinated. What does getting coordinated look like for us? Because again, you can't diagnose the problem on your own. It requires the relationship, the communication in the community with your neighbors and friends and others. So what does coordination look like? Community meetings and petitions. There may be a shared agenda. Maybe you all go and coordinate and testify at hearings. Good suggestion, Destiny, on like a coalition, establishing a coalition of all of the impacted groups, and you all determining, what the coordinated action would be so that you can have sustained pressure. And then each of us individually, whether it's individuals or individual organizations, are not burnt out because everybody has a role and everybody is playing their role as part of this coordinated action. And then it allows us to have sustained pressure and get to the win. Right? The other important part is on time. What does that coordinated action look like on a timeline? Right? Making clear, I believe in the SMART goals, having SMART, measurable, attainable goals with a time thing attached to it. And quite often in doing these types of organizing campaigns, there's already a time and a thing built in, because it could be, well, we're going to do a year, long process, and then the vote is happening in November on whether or not the data center is coming or not. Or it's the new school year. We want this policy to be in place before the following school year. And so we have until, the end of budget season, June 30th. Right. So it's also looking at the timeline and understanding what coordinated action and sustained pressure will be. So as I wrap up here, again, we are not powerless. We are just uncoordinated. And movements don't fail because people are uninformed or, misguided or anything like that. It is because we confuse visibility with influence, right? Just being out. And if I'm a joke I have is, during political campaigns, electoral campaigns, when I would advise candidates, and candidates want to see their posters and their names on stuff, whatever. And quite often I've been on campaigns where a candidate's like, I see more posters of my opponent than I see of mine. And those of us who are trained like consultants and activists, like we just like, posters don't vote. Like people do. We trying to move people, not posters. Posters cost money, not only to print the poster, but then you got to like get people to go put the visible poster out. Like we trying to move voters. Like we trying to move like posters. You can have posters in a window and lose. So it used to be an annoyance of mine about a candidate. I had a particular candidate and he would like ride down the street and be like, I counted 1,122 posters of my opponent and I only saw 800 of mine. I'm like, really, dude? But visibility alone does not move or have power. Power is not emotional, it is structural, it is a part of a plan that we engage. And I want us to lean in on our homework here, and looking at what does coordinated action, what does level 4 look like for the issue that you are working on. Now, for next week, I want to bring more of you into the conversation, and I want to pull out one or two examples of those of you who are doing this on a landscape analysis. I'm told the Nubia team is shy, which I can't believe that. as much as y'all be all up in the chat and everything like that. So you don't have to be on camera. You can if you want to. It could just be audio. But next week we want to take this a little deeper. So I want to take one or two of you and go deep on the issue that you've conducted a landscape analysis on. And as we get to next week's lesson, in charting out, building a campaign and that kind of engagement, want to use the one or two of you as an example. So you are going to, if you volunteer, and again, you could be on camera or you can just be audio only, to volunteer for us to engage and bring that to the front of the class. I think that would be great for us to have actual examples. Obviously, we have the example of Lowndes County and what that sustained pressure looked like. And we, the wins from that example, you not only have John Hewlett, in terms of being sheriff, but you have like subsequent wins for the community. But I want to take what you all are working on and give real examples of what can be done from that. All right. So you're going to move your issue that you've conducted a landscape analysis. You're going to identify the current level of activation around the level. Is it just that awareness? Is it information sharing where you are? Be honest, right, about where it is, right? This isn't, and it's not being graded, like you're not, being graded, but it's really being honest so that you can get to where you want to go. And then you're going to identify what does this coordinated action look like, and be specific, be concrete, don't be abstract. So don't give, write down notes like we need to organize more. That doesn't mean anything. Okay. It could be, we need to convene the top 5 stakeholders on this issue. We need to create a shared message. We need to schedule a current, whatever the thing is, make it specific. Not we need to be organized, and that's what's wrong with Black people. We ain't all together, and we, and is the African American in the foundation of Black America? Like, no. Don't do abstract. Do specific things that need to move to coordinated action. All right. And then what, a bonus question could be, what is stopping you from getting there? What is stopping the issue from getting to coordinated action? All right. Maybe you need to address that. All right. That's it. That's all we have today. All right. Thank you so very much for being a part of this Citizenship Lab. You guys are really, really informative. I don't know what these little faces are. Are y'all mad at me or not? But thank you so much for joining me this week. And tune in on Sunday. We'll have another in-depth class on Sunday Civics. So make sure to tune in at 10 a.m. Is it not 9 a.m. Eastern? And thank you so much for joining me. Bye.